Hi friends. Can you tell I'm nervous? Anyway. Hey, hi friends, it's me, Allie. If this is going all according to plan, this is most likely the first video ever on my channel, so welcome to Library of Allie. Allie is me, I am Allie. And today I just wanted to do kind of like an introductory video talking about my 10 favourite classics of all time ranked. I ranked these, be proud of me. And so I thought I would go from like number 10 favourite classic to number 1 all-time favourite classic ever. These are the classics that I would sell my soul to Satan to be able to read for the first time again. We're talking about those books that fundamentally change something inside of my soul. That's the level upon which I love these books. So shall we begin, I guess? Hi. I don't know what else to say. I've been a lurker on booktube for a very long time, so I thought, why not? Let's just start, or else we'll be here for a while. So number 10 on my list, if you see me looking down, it's because I literally have notes. Number 10 on my list is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. Now, mind you, I have not reread this since I read it for the first time when I was 16, but this holds a very special place in my heart. This is the book that narrates the story of Jane Eyre herself. I think it's technically a coming of age story. We see her kind of grow up and we're with her as she is with her aunt, who is quite frankly terrible. We see her at Lowood School, and then we see her becoming a governess to Adele, like everything that happens with Mr. Rochester. So I think for me, I felt really seen by this book when I read it for the first time. I think a lot of us, when we read this in year 10 in literature, we really connected with Jane, and that was exactly the same for me. I know this might be a really cliche choice, but the reading experience of this book, we read it in class. The teacher just was so in love with literature. She loved this book so much that her love really transferred onto us. The experience of reading this book is something that I still have memories of, and that type of experience is not something that you really forget. And I also think this was one of the first classics that I read and loved in a school setting. I don't think I had that experience and up until then, like this like all-consuming love for like a classic novel. I just thought that they were very dense and inaccessible to read as a teenager, but this definitely changed it. I'm gonna have to reread this because I haven't read it since I was 16. I'm now 28. I'm nearly 30. But I think my reaction to this might be a little bit different because of Mr. Rochester. I feel like as a teenager, I loved him, thought he was like the most sexiest thing. But like now, I mean, he's kind of a dick. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I mean, who does that to your wife, mate? But I think the story itself is just... And then next is one that I think is on most people's favourite classics to read, and is one that most people actually recommend if you want to begin getting into classics. And that is obviously The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Oh, this book. I think there's a reason why this is so wholeheartedly recommended, and it's because it's just really beautifully written, and it's kind of easy. It's not as dense as some of these classics on this list, and it's just a stunning example of like literature. Oscar Wilde is a master storyteller. If you haven't read his plays, highly recommend you do. I haven't put any of his plays on this list because I wanted to stick to novels, but A Woman of No Importance, oh, my favorite play of all time. Anyway, his brilliance, Oscar Wilde, is in the understanding of the human psyche and his almost like lyrical prose. I just really love him. I love Oscar Wilde's, the way that he creates his stories, his characters. Love it. But I guess I'll just briefly talk about what the book is about. I should probably do that. So similar to the myth of Narcissus, The Picture of Dorian Gray is about this young man, Dorian, who is exceptionally beautiful. He is so hot and everyone tells him so. And he then becomes friends with this artist named Basil, who is obsessed, infatuated intensely with Dorian's beauty. But Basil creates his portrait. So what happens is that essentially Dorian remains beautiful and young and gorgeous and, you know, constantly hits the town, but his portrait doesn't. So essentially it's a conversation of like vice and corruption of the soul, and, you know, observing that in real time, so to speak, in the portrait. So the portrait is like a mirror to the soul, and it's fascinating, it's brilliant, it's engaging, it's different. Highly recommend, absolutely love it. Next one, let's do it. Oh, nearly created an accident there. The next one is one that I really don't know how to talk about, to be quite frank. When I read this, I think the biggest feeling that I had was confusion, and that's Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. Virginia Woolf I love. She is a literary figure that I absolutely adore. I just connect with her. I love her. I love her writing, and I did feel confused with this book, but I think the confusion lends itself really well to this narrative. The ambiguity of it, I feel like, makes the reading experience just more fun and intense and engaging and immersive. I'm not actually going to tell you about what the book is about. I feel like you need to kind of go in not really knowing, but do know this, it's got no plot, not really. It's kind of a stream of consciousness type of narrative, which is very characteristic of Virginia Woolf. It's focusing on detailing a day in the life of Mrs. Dalloway as she's preparing for a party. She is a society hostess, according to the blurb, and we have a sort of like non-linear type of story where it kind of goes back in time and comes back to the present. I think it's an interwar story, maybe? It's like meant to depict the kind of socio-cultural context of the time. There is a character who is dealing with PTSD, I'm pretty sure, whom is one of my favourite characters in this book. But yeah, Mrs. Dalloway, really stunning, quite a short novel, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend this for beginners. It's more like an intermediate. And then the next one was a huge surprise. I picked this up spontaneously, and I think you'll know why when I show you the book. The Plague by Albert Camus. I apologise, my accent is absolutely atrocious. The Plague is literally about a plague. Oh my god, who would have thought? I think you know when I read this. I think you know. Story takes place in the city of Oran. My accent. O-R-A-N. Oran. French Algeria at the time. I think it takes place in the 1940s, but it was influenced by the cholera. The accent, babes. Cholera outbreak in 1840s that happened in the same city. So the city isn't fictional, it's a real city. Anyway, so the narrator of the story remains unnamed until the end, which was kind of a very interesting narrative choice. Really loved it. So it details essentially the tumultuousness, the horror, the pain, the suffering that the city experiences, the people experience as the city is dealing with an outbreak of the bubonic plague. I read this in 2020. And I felt like our collective experience was being represented by this book. Like, I was reading it and I remember thinking, oh my god, this fictional story, like Albert Camus literally saw into the future and he wrote about what we were feeling. And obviously that means that, you know, other people have been feeling this in the past when this sort of thing happens, and it really highlighted to me like this almost like cyclical nature of just human history, and it made me feel really connected to just everyone, to like humanity. It was a really humbling experience, I have to admit. My reaction emotionally, especially to this book, was quite visceral, and I highly recommend it because Albert Camus is a stunning writer, and his insights into just humanity is it's just brilliant. I highly recommend people need to read Albert Camus more. This next one, I just forgot. I just remembered. This next one is not for everyone. I don't know if I would actually recommend this because it's divisive. It is controversial. I feel like if you want to read this, you have to know the trigger warnings, because for some people it might be, honestly, it's an issue. It's 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And I love this book. I read this book and I had a very strange reading experience. I didn't like it in the first like 100 pages, and then I absolutely fell in love with it. I was uncomfortable reading this, but also just so engaged and so in love with the writing and this kind of like magical speculative aspect to it. I still remember this book, and I remember talking about it in book club. Like, that's how much this book is like cemented in my soul. The best way of reading this book is not to know anything about it, but also knowing some of what does happen that might be too much for people. For instance, trigger warnings for incest and the P word. I don't know what I can and can't say. There's literally everything that happens. There's violence. I'm pretty sure there's SA, maybe. It's just very intense, and it's meant to be. It's deliberately done that way. So you have, essentially, it talks about this family, the Buendia family, in this fictional town of Macondo. So the patriarch of the Buendia family founded this town, and the story is literally about the family members kind of descending into perversion, corruption, evil. And as the Buendia family descends into madness, into evil, the town itself of Macondo is slowly being destroyed. So there's like this really intense connection between the town and the family, and the town itself, Macondo, is very much a character in this story. It's one of the most unique classics I've ever read, one of the most unique books I've ever read, and I'm not gonna lie, it's uncomfortable for people. It was uncomfortable for me in the beginning because things happen. I mean, I literally have an annotation here that says the incest, nope, like literally. I don't know if you can see that, because that's just what would happen. It's one of my most heavily annotated books though. So number 5 is this fucking massive tome of a novel, War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. I love this book. I love it in like a very gentle way. I don't know how to explain it, but I read War and Peace as part of the, is Dickens versus Tolstoy, that's hosted by Emma from Emmy and Carolyn Marie Reads here on YouTube. So I read this last year. I read this over 2 months. It was gorgeous. It was gorgeous. It's long, couldn't have been edited most likely, but I loved every second of it. It was brilliantly written. I loved the themes that Tolstoy explored. Obviously of war, obviously of peace, but it was more about like, you know, like the theatre of war, but also the politics of kind of aristocracy and the exploration of like class and wealth and privilege, but also about the experiences of soldiers. I think some of the most emotionally intense scenes in this book are when you're with characters in war and the realization of like the futility of war. It's just a very gorgeous, huge, wide expanse of a novel, and it is a very much an experience to read this. Also, oh my god, there's like so much things about hands, which I really love. I loved this. It was great. I would recommend breaking it down if you want to read it. It's a commitment. I read it in 2 months, and I think that was the perfect amount for me personally, because I didn't at all get bored of it. I think if I read it over a year, I would have gotten bored. Does that make sense? Anyway, that's War and Peace. Absolutely incredible. Highly recommend. For those who are ready for it, like it's a hard book to read. It's so dense. The next one on my list is one of my favorite. Oh my god, we're in our top 4 now. Persuasion by Jane Austen. This novel, I read this for the first time in 2020. What can I say about this book? This is like one of the most gorgeously written novels of all time. Is that a big thing to say? I feel like that's, but I thought that the character of Anne Elliot is just so beautiful and wonderful, and one of the most unique heroines that Jane Austen has written. I loved her. I loved her story. The letter, if you've read this book, you know just everything about this book. It's kind of unconventional. It's a story about second chances. It's just with like the signature wit of Jane Austen. I think it's absolutely stunning, and I would recommend it with my entire heart. I loved this book, and I think I read this after I read, was it after or before I read Mansfield Park? And I didn't really enjoy Mansfield Park that much, and I think I read this, and I remember just like sitting on my bed, especially the letter scene. I remember texting my friend Bess going, oh my god, like I was very emotional. I think I may have cried. Anyway, the third book on my list is another big one, and it's Middlemarch by George Eliot. This is actually a book that I read this year. It's one of my favourite books of 2022. What do I say about this book that hasn't already been said? That is the issue. My favourite character in this, I feel like a lot of people consider her their favourite character, is Dorothea. I love Dorothea. She is amazing. I connected immediately with her. I started reading this book as an audiobook, and then after a while I was like, not after a while, it would have been like 30 pages. I was like, I need to physically read this book because I want to annotate the shit out of it, and I did. There are just so many beautiful, beautiful quotes in this. The storylines, the characters, the romance. Honestly, to a different level. The emotion that I felt in this book. I also had, like, this book had one of my most hated characters, Mr. Casaubon. Casaubon? It just has everything in it. It's like family, romance and love, explorations of like class and privilege and, you know, toxic relationships and unhealthy relationships and abusive relationships, and it's just a stunning novel that I think a lot of people get scared about or intimidated by, which, yes, George Eliot is very dense and she can be quite hard to read, and I get that. Honestly, I feel that there were times when I was just like, well, okay, George Eliot, can we get to a point? But overall, absolutely fantastic. I think maybe starting with an audiobook could be good if you find a really good one. So I recommend that. Maybe starting with an audiobook just to get a feel for it. Because honestly, the density of George Eliot's writing can be a turnoff, but it's so worth it. This novel captured my entire heart and also mind. Now getting to my second favourite classic of all time. It's Emma by Jane Austen, another Jane Austen. I love this book, as you know. I love every book on this list. But Emma was a Jane Austen novel that I was really intimidated by, and I honestly thought that I would dislike it. But I was so surprised when I read it. This was not the copy that I read. I read another copy that's much thicker. I was quite intimidated by the size, but Emma is just everything that I love about a Jane Austen novel. So we have Emma Woodhouse, and she's selfish, she's privileged, she is blinded by her own privilege, and she takes up matchmaking, and essentially like there are consequences. Emma Woodhouse, it's a huge like character study, a wonderful cast of characters. It's the most like character development that I've seen in like a Jane Austen novel. I mean, Emma, she really self-reflects. She realizes a lot of things about herself that aren't quite positive. And then obviously you have this wonderful love story with Mr. Knightley. Oh my god, Mr. Knightley, I think, is he my favourite Jane Austen hero? I think he might be. I think he is. I think he is. I know. I'm sorry for the Mr. Darcy girlies, but for me it's Mr. Knightley. I love him, and I just loved their relationship. He did not care, as in like he would tell Emma, he's like, Emma, you are being a little shithead. Not in that like those words obviously, but essentially that's what he was saying, and it was just really fun. Just really fun, really great. Had such a lovely time. It's my favourite Jane Austen novel, and I can't wait to reread it. We love her. Do you think you can guess my favourite classic novel of all time? Because I kind of gave a hint before. I'm being strange. I read this, I think, in 2020 as well. And I think, you know, that saying where sometimes the book finds you? I think that was definitely one of those moments. Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. I cannot tell you my experience reading this novel. I feel like it fundamentally changed me as a person. Does that sound weird? But it's true. I came out of this experience feeling like I changed. Oh my god. I was so blown away by this story. By Anna, by Levin, by Kitty. Everything about this novel. Tolstoy blew me away. This was my first Tolstoy novel that I ever read. His writing blindsided me. I wasn't quite ready for it, actually. So even though this book is titled Anna Karenina, it's not really about Anna. Like, it is, she is one of the perspectives that we follow, but it's really about the impact that Anna has on people around her. And so I would maybe argue that Levin is the main character of this story, and his story is wonderful. He's an incredible character. I love him so much. But it's about the impact that Anna has on these people around her and how she brings them together and all that sort of interesting stuff. I'm trying to sound more smart than I am. But this, yeah, honestly, fantastic. I underlined like passages and stuff, but I didn't annotate it fully. I do want to reread it so I can annotate it. But this emotionally it put me through it. Honestly, I remember reading this and having like violent reactions to it. I would throw it across the bed. Like, it was just everything that I wanted. The drama, the like courtly, aristocratic, the politics and the manners and all these, the drama and the betrayals, and it had everything that I wanted. And Tolstoy's writing. Honestly, Tolstoy's writing is like the huge takeaway from this. It's literally brilliant. Like, literally brilliant. Tolstoy does like to go on tangents, and in this one it's about agriculture. I was so far up fucking this book's arse that I loved reading about agricultural stuff. I loved this journey that Levin was going on. So for me it wasn't an issue, but I know it can be an issue for other readers. I also recommend reading this as an audiobook. I read it as an audiobook and following along physically reading. I just found that to be, it just like tripled my experience of this book. It was magnificent. This has such a huge place in my heart. And I think around the same time a few people on like Bookstagram and BookTube were also reading this novel, and it was really interesting to see other people's reaction and responses and like the conversations that we were all having online. So it was really fun. And there you have it. My 10 favorite classics of all time. I hope this was interesting to watch. I apologize if I am not yet ready for being in front of the camera. It'll be a work in progress. If you have any questions about me, please ask them away. I am an open book. Also follow me on my socials. I'm Library of Allie, literally everywhere. Instagram, I'm Library of Alexandra. I'll leave it all linked down below. I think my next video, hopefully, is going to be like a booktube newbie tag, just to introduce myself a bit more. But if you have sex specific questions, please let me know. That way I can also answer them. And yeah, I think that's all that I wanted to say. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Have you read any of these? Are any of these your favorite classics of all time? Like, let me know. Like, let's start like a little book club. Like, let's have a little community here. I'm really excited and I'm ready for the adventure. Let's do it. So yeah, be safe, take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye friends.